All right, everyone, let's get started. Thank you for making the time to connect with the Flosum team today. Myself, Neff Vasquez, possibly customer success manager of yours. If not, I'm sure someone on our team is taking good care of you. I would like to thank everyone for making it promptly. Additionally, if you are on the webinar and are not currently in possession of credentials for our success portal, please either reach out to your customer success manager for access to the portal, or feel free to go to success.flosum.com. And you'll see a button in the lower right that says not a member, where you can create your own credentials there and have access to our success portal for documentation and for upload of this webinar thereafter. We'll also have a YouTube link, but our success portal is definitely the place to be. If you use Flosum and don't have access to it, definitely grab that. I would like to note that through the course of the presentation, the Q&A section will be active, and we have folks from the team who are on standby to answer any questions that go there in real time. So please feel free, if you have anything, elicit any questions, go ahead and pop them in there. At the end of the session, we'll also have a slide at the very end, a big pink slide that asks if you have any straggling questions that you may have saved for the end. So we'll remain on that slide for a couple of minutes just to make sure that anything that comes to mind, you've had the opportunity to ask and get a quick answer for, and anything thereafter, contact your customer success manager or check out our portal. And with that, we'll start up with a pull request in Flosum. And on the agenda, we're going to go through a quick overview of some use cases for the pull request function within Flosum. We'll go through what the settings are for what kind of actions can be configured to have pull requests enabled for them to complete, and how to set up the permissions so that once those actions are set, that your users have the appropriate permissions to participate in submitting a pull request, just executing a pull request, reviewing a pull request, and having the dialogue that pull requests should elicit when you're going through the process of reviewing your target, your source branch against a target or a deployment or repository. So we'll get into all those details. And bear with me, I will be toggling between the presentation and the actual Flosum app interchangeably, just to help drive some of the actions and reinforce them. So you'll see me do that occasionally throughout the presentation. So to kick things off with use cases for pull requests, we have 4. So the first that we see is process. We really believe that when it comes to some of the feedback we get from customers around process, there's some areas where they'd like to kind of safeguard and make sure that there's a good, dutiful review of code by your peers. So in this sense, pull request is really useful if you would like to more closely monitor branches or the contents of a deployment before they reach an org. Or if there's code that is on the verge of being committed to your repository, that you have the appropriate stakeholders there monitoring what's about to be merged, deployed, or committed. Additionally, communication. You can increase communication among team members and even disparate teams by enforcing pull requests, so that if there has been work on shared components in any of the above scenarios, that you do have good oversight and line of sight into what those changes are. You can have them flagged as differences, and you can have a dialogue around what those differences are, and be sure that there's an accordance with all of the folks concerned with the state of components as they're going into shared branches, new orgs, or the repository. Knowledge share. Your team will be more knowledgeable on the changes that have occurred. So it was pretty straightforward on that front. The more people involved, more people lending eyes to differences as they're progressing into higher environments, then you'll have a more informed populace. And finally, the quality of your deployments will improve. So you'll have less, hindsight situations where, something gets rolled out and, somebody is surprised by a change and maybe you have to do a rollback and, readjust some settings. In this way, I like to think that if hindsight is 20/20, then this is a system for foresight, and maybe that's 30/20, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of good foresight, improving the quality of your deployments. So with that, we'll progress to the pull request settings and permissions. So the settings for actions that could mandate pull requests are found within Flosum under the settings and pull request and code review section. So allow me to toggle over to Flosum and show you that. If you're seeing this home screen and you don't have your home screen looking this way, contact your customer success manager. It's our swim lanes feature if you haven't set it up. It's really, really handy. But back to pull requests, you go to settings and the subsection for pull requests and code review. All right, let's go back to our presentation. With branch merging being one scenario, deployments being another scenario, and repository commitments being another. The major use cases that we like to kind of emphasize when it comes to branch merges is they're very useful for the shared team or release branches that you may have people promoting their code into. Valuable for approving changes early so that anything that is a change worthy of a further discussion, it's not something that happens later on in a timeline for a sprint when things are getting closer to deployment, and maybe you should have had a conversation a little bit sooner. And it ensures that that code is officially qualified by stakeholders. So if you get the minimum number of approvals required for the code, then it's ready to go, and there's no scenario where you're backtracking and trying to untangle something that shouldn't have made it into a shared branch. In the way of deployment, useful for mandating that final review, especially when it comes to production deployments. So would definitely recommend considering this for any deployments that are bound for production. If you're on the precipice of that, it might be good to have a few to a handful of folks signing off on what's about to change for the entire organization. And repository commitments, good for keeping a golden copy of all of your components in the repository and making sure it's a source of truth for everyone that accesses it. So I want to show you guys how to actually make adjustments to mandate pull requests for these actions. And to start off, this drop-down menu for the commit to repository, I'll toggle over back to Flosum for this as well. You see all three options. So you have branch merge, deployment, and repository. They're all three independent settings that you can save. So bear with me, at least 3 people in this scenario, right? For a commit to repository. Notice when I switch over to merge branch, this is toggled over to 2. When I toggle over to deployment, this is toggled over to 1. So with each adjustment that you make, you're going to want to make sure that you save the settings that you have for it, right? So let's go ahead and make merge branch a mandated action that prompts a pull request. Save that. You'll get the banner that confirms that. And if I toggle over to commit to repository, you'll see this has gone back to ignore, and it's a value of 3 for the commit to repository, but it's still an ignore. If I get back to merge branch, at least 2 and mandated. So just want to make sure that you guys know that as you toggle through these 3 different scenarios, you will see the values change, the settings change, and you need to save them after you've noted the number of folks that need to have approvals. And also, optional, mandate static code analysis. If you are integrated with Apex PMD, you can enable this setting so that the branch that's being submitted for a pull request needs to have had static code analysis run on it in order to actually go through the pull request process. So that would be one of the steps that you can further mandate as part of the pull request review. And this last section here, pull request reset settings is also an optional area, but it's actually rather valuable if you should determine that there are some component types that merit more closer scrutiny, and to altogether reset a pull request even should they be committed to a branch or updated on a branch. So in this case, you'll see if anyone commits an Apex class or updates an Apex class on a branch, it's going to reset the pull request. If your organization is trying to kind of be more stringent, monitor code levels for specific component types, this is where you could really focus in on those and make sure that those reset the status of the pull request and get folks back into a peer review if they make any changes to these sections, to these components. And you'll want to save that when the time comes, all of your settings for those three actions. And once you have those actions defined, what you're going to want to do is make sure that your users have the appropriate permissions to participate in the pull request process. And we advise that using permission set groups is likely the most efficient way that you can configure those permissions. You can configure individual user permissions, but if you want to kind of do it in a broader stroke, you can use permission set groups. I'm sure that the majority of you know how to do this already, if not all of you, but just a quick recap of how this is performed. You'll go to Setup, Quick Find, and Permission Set Groups. So this setup gear icon. Permission set groups. All right, and you'll see some are already created here. A new one from scratch, this button in the upper right-hand corner, and let's just call it test group for now. Once you have this group, you will proceed to permission sets in group. Add permission set. And from here, if you want to be quick about it, you can do Control F or Command F if you're on an Apple. Look up pull, and you'll see the 4 permissions that correspond to pull requests. I'll recite them in a particular order: create pull request, review pull request, update pull request, and disable enable pull request for the branch are the 4 permissions you can configure. What those correspond to, back to our presentation. All right, permission sets in group. Create, you're given the ability to submit a pull request. Review, the ability to review a pull request. And specifically, this is to be named a reviewer of pull requests, to be selected as a peer reviewer. So you'll want to enable this for anyone who will go in and be an option for checking out code review. Submissions. Updating pull requests is the ability to go back in after the fact if you have already approved or rejected a pull request. If you change your mind in hindsight, based upon the conversation that ensues within the pull request, which we'll see in a moment, you can go back and actually update your approval or rejection status. And the final permission, disable enable pull request for the branch. This grants the user the ability to uncheck the mandates around pull requests for that specific branch. So the reason I recited them in the order that I did on that last screen and listed them here is we see this as kind of an escalation of permissions, right? This is what I would call the most admin permission in the whole set. And we do recommend a similar configuration to this, just as a reference we wanted to provide you guys. When it comes to the groups, we would recommend a minimum of 3 groups be set up, and you'll see back on the Flosum interface, that's how we set it up as well. We have PR submissions, pull request submissions, pull request reviewers, and pull request admins. And in the way of the 4 permissions that are available to the users, for PR submissions, you're going to want to have a lot of users, if not all of your users, enabled for the pull request submission. So go ahead and grant that permission to them. All the other ones, you don't necessarily need to outfit this group to review, update, or disable enable pull requests. We would recommend that you create another group of reviewers. So the reviewer group, they have the optional optional permission for creating pull requests, maybe you've already included them in the above group, so it cascades on down to them there. When it comes to the review pull request permissions, absolutely grant them that permission so they can be listed and selected as reviewers. Updating a pull request, it's optional. If you want to grant this group the option to go back in and update an approval or rejection of an existing pull request they'd already reviewed and weighed in on. And the disable enable pull requests, we would recommend not enabling it for the reviewer group. And the final group would have the least users. You would optionally give them this ability. The same reason here, likely cascades from this original group. But all these other permissions, these admin permissions, you want to make sure that you give them these enablements in case they need to go in and make any special circumstantial settings, updates based upon user feedback. So with that, let's actually execute a pull request. So within Flosum, you execute pull requests from the branch. So let's take branch 32 as an example. It's my branch, and I'll do it in parallel over here. So you go to branches, we'll go to branch 32. And from here, it's the fourth button over in my interface. This is a standard uncustomized layout, pull request as the fourth option. All right. And from there, you'll get this view, create pull request, mirrored here. So what I want to call out for you is these are the areas where your users are able to make adjustments that will carry through to the reviewers that are selected. So you can adjust the title of the pull request, and you can adjust the description. The description specifically is really intended to be the comment that reaches your reviewers. So in this case, my description is, this is a feature branch for branch 32 that is to be compared to Sprint 17's release branch. That's where I'm intending to merge this. Down below, you have the available users that were granted the reviewer permission. And I selected Matt as the lucky participant in my pull request and click create pull request. Once you click create pull request, the folks that you selected in this right-hand panel will receive an email like this that says, hello user, you've been invited to participate in this pull request created by Neff. Pull request link is here, and they can click on that link and proceed to it, which will put them into the review mode for the pull request. So the reviewer can utilize the link that was emailed, so the link that they received that was shown in that last slide, or they can manually navigate to the pull request tab and then select the pull request. So back to the Flosum interface, pull request tab, right? And here are all of the pull requests that I've historically been invited to participate in. And this is the one that I set up in our example from the deck. So Neff's test feature branch. Once you click there, Neff's test feature branch, you'll be transmitted to the details screen where you'll see the approval or rejection status and the pending status as well for the pull request you've selected. So there's more of a mix. If there's approvals and rejections, you'll get a more colorful chart here. And once you click review, it'll put you into the review UI for pull request. So this review UI will default to repository. So I'll show you in parallel over here again with Flosum. You click review, and it loads out with a repository test repo, more like the default repo you have in your environment for comparisons. But you'll see anything that's new is highlighted in green, anything that's different is in yellow, and anything that's identical will actually be a red. So I'll show you what that looks like since this is actually a comparison to a branch based upon the instructions here, feature branch to be compared to Sprint 17. So once you toggle over to the branch instead of the repository, you'll see this subsection changes from the repository selection drop-down menu to the branch selection pop-up. And from here, I've been looking up Sprint quite a bit. So I'll look up Sprint and find the Sprint 17 release branch. you'll get this instantaneous feedback of what the branch version for branch 32 looks like against the target branch version of sprint 17. Let me take us back to the presentation shortly. So it goes through this as well. The branch dropdown, opening up that pop-up to look up sprint 17, getting into this screen. So these red identical callouts are what I was referring to. So you know straight away that there's no changes. But with the yellow differences, if you want to preview what that looks like, you can click over onto the eyeball preview, which actually changes to view details within the interface. Right? You click into it, and you'll get a pop-up that shows, and this is very similar. A lot of you are looking at this and thinking the conflict merge screen, which is a very similar interface. The thing that differs here is there's no merge operations for you. That's not what this screen is about. It's about having a conversation with the person that's submitting this for approval. In this case, Alta Vista News was a component that got adjusted to offline versus online, or the way it is in the target. So if I had a question, regarding why is this an offline status, what has happened to Alta Vista News, I would click here on line number 4, and I would get this pop-up. So I'll show you that in Flosum. All right. So you see this, the cursor changes as you hover over these lines. That's so that you can pop in some dialogue here. And you'll also notice difference from this point in time in the presentation of when I commented, why is it offline? The conversation has advanced since then. Matt logged in and said, I don't know, Todd, which he assures me is a reference to National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. So the conversation can go on, and it'll save. So I've come into this pull request, for 4 days already. The conversation will keep going until we've reached an understanding on why this component has changed to availability offline. And if we need to have more of a meta conversation, this is a chatter section where you can have more of a higher level conversation. And this would be more of a in the weeds conversation on particular settings. So Matt received a notification when I asked why it was offline, and he followed that notification in his email to the pull request section where he can reply directly here. And once you're done with kind of marking up the areas that you need more clarification as a reviewer on, you can finish out your pull requests by either approving or rejecting. And if you have the permissions to update pull requests, you'll actually see these will be perpetually available to you. Whereas if you don't have the ability to update a pull request, once you approve or reject, it'll close out and you'll actually see this instead, where there are no options to update. So just a note, if you do have the ability to update pull requests, you'll see these in perpetuity. And with that, I think kind of a pretty straightforward feature within Flosum. We've had a number of conversations with folks who haven't yet ventured into it, and hopefully some of this has lent some more thought or uses that you can utilize for your CI/CD process on Flosum. But yeah, appreciate everyone attending, and we look forward to our next connection with you, and reach out if you have any questions in hindsight. Thank you very much. Have a great day.